Have you ever had the feeling that your relationship is wearing down little by little, without any major fights, without betrayals, without apparent dramas? It's as if something invisible is slowly consuming what once united you. According to Freud, this is not a coincidence. What destroys a relationship is not always what's visible, it's what's hidden. And the worst part? You might be repeating the same pattern over and over again without even realizing it. Freud argued that many of our behaviors in adult life, especially in love, are determined by experiences we had in childhood. That's where the roots of our emotional patterns lie. Our first relationships with parents, caregivers, and even siblings shape the way we interpret affection, rejection, care, and abandonment. And if these first connections were marked by pain, absence, excessive control, or emotional distance, this will influence how we relate in adult life. Let's imagine a person who grew up with a cold or emotionally distant mother. As a child, they tried in every way to win her affection, but received little or no response. Freud would say that this child grows up with a strong, unconscious need to be accepted and loved. And this need can manifest in adult life through relationships with emotionally unavailable partners. That's right. The person seeks, without realizing it, to resolve in the present what was left unresolved in the past. They are trying to finally get the love they didn't get as a child. But here's the problem. By choosing partners who are incapable of giving this love, they end up reliving the same wound over and over again. Freud called this repetition compulsion. It's as if the unconscious puts us in similar situations, hoping that, this time, the ending will be different. But usually it's not, because what needs to change is not the situation, but our internal pattern. And while this pattern remains hidden, it keeps guiding our choices. It's a silent sabotage. And there's more. Many of our expectations in love are fantasies created in childhood. The idea that someone will come and complete us, save us from pain, or make us feel whole again. These are projections. And when the other person does not fulfill these unconscious expectations, frustration appears. We feel disappointed, not because the other person did something wrong, but because they didn't fit into the role we had assigned them. And this frustration accumulates, becomes resentment, distance, and eventually rupture. Freud also emphasized that many of our relationship conflicts are actually projections of internal conflicts. That is, what bothers us in the other person often reflects something unresolved within ourselves. An insecurity, a fear, a need. So when we complain that the other doesn't give us attention, maybe it's because we don't know how to ask for it, or because we learned in childhood that we shouldn't need anyone. Every gesture of coldness or withdrawal touches a very old wound, and we react not only to the present, but to all the past that is still open within us. Understanding all this is not simple. It requires courage to look inward and recognize that much of what destroys our relationships is not outside. It's within. Freud invites us to dive into the unconscious, to unearth the repressed memories, the hidden desires, the fears we don't want to admit. Only then can we break the cycle of repetition and build healthier, more conscious bonds. In Freud's view, one of the most dangerous enemies of a relationship is not what is said, but what remains unsaid. Silences that scream, looks that accuse, gestures that repeat patterns that originated far, far back. Often a person brings to the present a ghost from the past, an unresolved pain, an unmet need, and expects their partner to heal what wasn't healed in childhood. But no one can play the role of your mother. No one can heal the wounds your father left. And this is where things start to fall apart without us realizing it. Freud called this repetition compulsion, an unconscious impulse to repeat old emotional situations, even if they hurt us, because they are familiar. You fight for attention from someone who is emotionally distant, just like you fought for the attention of a distant parent in childhood. You fear abandonment and sabotage the relationship before it has a chance to grow, just like you feared being left behind by those who should have protected you. You accept disrespect, not because you like to suffer, but because your inner child learned that love always came with a dose of pain. Do you understand how deep this goes? A relationship starts to deteriorate when we begin to project into the other what we have not yet resolved within ourselves. Suddenly, every small disagreement becomes a war. Every silence is interpreted as rejection. Every absence is a trauma. And worst of all, we believe it's the other person's fault. But Freud teaches us that what most disturbs us in the other is often a reflection of what we cannot face in ourselves. Your partner is not the enemy. The enemy is the wound you've been carrying in silence. And these wounds manifest in various ways: through passive-aggressive behavior, through emotional coldness, through excessive control. You begin to demand what you never received without realizing that the other person is not responsible for healing what belongs to you. Do you want proof of this? Just think, how many times have you exploded over something trivial, only to realize later that your reaction had more to do with your past than the present moment? That's the child in you crying out. Another aspect that Freud highlights is defense mechanisms. When we're hurt, we develop unconscious strategies to protect ourselves from suffering: denial, projection, rationalization. But these defenses also create walls between you and the person who's beside you. You stop seeing the other as they are and start seeing them through the lenses of your fear, your distrust, your unresolved pain. Love begins to be filtered through trauma, and what was supposed to be a refuge turns into a battlefield. So yes, what is destroying your relationship may not be your partner's behavior, but what you still haven't dared to look at inside yourself. The pain that remains hidden, the anger that was never expressed, the affection that was never received. Freud said that we are not masters of our own house, that the unconscious governs much of what we do, think, and feel. If you don't confront your ghost, they will inhabit your relationship, and they will devour everything. Now think, how many relationships have ended not because of lack of love, but because of excess of unresolved pain? How many couples drift apart not because they're incompatible, but because they're carrying too much history that doesn't belong to the present? You don't destroy a relationship overnight. You destroy it in the small things, in the silence that wasn't broken, in the resentment that accumulated, in the trauma that was never healed. And here's the final truth: love is not enough. At least not the love that is not conscious, not the love that comes from an emotional vacuum. Love alone does not sustain a relationship if what holds it together is pain, fear, or trauma. Freud would say that love is also a stage where our internal conflicts are played out. We are attracted to people who awaken something in us, often what needs to be healed. And when we do not have awareness of this, we confuse attraction with salvation. We believe that the other person will fix what was broken, but no one has that responsibility. Healing is an individual path. So what then destroys a relationship? It's not just betrayal, not lies, not routine. Sometimes it's something much more subtle and dangerous: unconscious repetition, the patterns that are repeated, the childhood roles that are resumed, the wounds that continue to bleed in the present. Freud would ask, what do you really seek in this relationship? Is it love, or is it recognition, security, validation? And when you don't get what you expect, do you react as an adult or as the child who once cried and was not heard? To save a relationship, you need to look inside, not to blame yourself, but to understand. What stories are you carrying that don't belong to the present? What expectations are you placing on your partner that they could never fulfill? What are you demanding in love that, deep down, is a cry for attention, for care, for affection that you should first give to yourself? You cannot build a healthy we without first healing your I, and Freud offers us a way out. Awareness, self-observation, the courage to confront what hurts. When you begin to recognize your unconscious patterns, when you allow yourself to feel what you repressed for years, when you stop blaming the other for what you haven't resolved within, you change. And when you change, your relationship changes too. Because the ghosts lose strength, the wounds begin to heal. Love becomes lighter. The truth is that many people are not tired of love. They are tired of loving from a place of pain, of repeating old stories, of trying to receive from the other what they never received from their parents. But your relationship is not your therapy. Your partner is not your savior. The moment you understand this, you begin to build something truly new, So I invite you to reflect. What part of your relationship may be being poisoned by old unhealed wounds? What do you need to say that you've been keeping quiet? What patterns have you repeated without realizing it? Because deep down, what destroys relationships is not the absence of love. It's the absence of self-awareness. Freud teaches us that only when we look inward with honesty can we begin to transform what seems destined to fail. You don't have to repeat the past. You can write a new story, but for that, you need to wake up and ask yourself, not what your partner needs to change, but what still needs to be healed in you.